My name is Isabel, and I remember that night as if it happened yesterday. The night I sat on the cold floor of my room, hugging my knees, with silent tears running down my face. I had reached a place so dark, so full of pain, that I no longer recognized the girl in the mirror. Life had thrown more at me than I thought I could handle: failure, rejection, loneliness. Everything felt heavy. I had tried to be strong for so long, but that night, something inside me broke. But here's the truth: sometimes, you have to break to rebuild. And that night, as I wiped away my tears and looked up at the ceiling, I made a quiet promise to myself, not out loud, not dramatic, but a deep personal vow. I will win. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I will. This is the story of how my darkest night became the beginning of my strength. The night I cried and promised myself to win. It all began with silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence you feel when you're alone with your thoughts or sitting by the sea. No, this was the kind of silence that screamed. The kind that fills a room when your heart is broken, when your spirit is tired, and when you no longer have the energy to pretend everything is fine. I remember sitting on my bed, staring at the wall. My room was dark, except for the soft light from a street lamp outside. The shadows danced on the ceiling, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even cry at first. My body felt frozen. Inside me, it was like a storm had passed. But it had left everything destroyed. Earlier that day, I had received another rejection letter, this time for a job I really believed I would get. It wasn't just any job. It was something I had studied for, dreamed about, and worked hard to achieve. I had gone through months of applications, interviews, waiting, hoping, and now it was gone. Just like that. But the rejection wasn't just about the job. It was the last drop in a glass that was already too full. In the weeks before, I had lost friends. Not because of a big fight, but because life had changed. People grew apart. They stopped checking in. I started feeling invisible, as if I didn't matter anymore. My phone would stay silent for days, and I would scroll through social media, watching everyone else living their happy lives, laughing, traveling, celebrating, and there I was, just surviving, barely. Even my family didn't really know what I was going through. I wore a mask around them. I smiled when I needed to. I said I was fine whenever they asked. But deep down, I felt like I was falling apart and no one could see it. That night, after the rejection, I sat on the floor of my room. I didn't even have the strength to make it to the bed. I leaned my back against the wall, hugged my knees to my chest, and I just sat there. My chest felt heavy. My throat burned from holding back tears. And then, slowly, they started to fall. I cried quietly at first, then louder. Then I couldn't stop. The kind of crying where your whole body shakes. The kind where you run out of breath and sob until your eyes hurt. I cried for the job I didn't get. I cried for the friends who forgot me. I cried for the version of myself I used to be: happy, full of dreams, hopeful, and most of all, I cried because I didn't recognize who I had become. I felt like a failure, and that word repeated itself in my head over and over again. Failure, failure, failure. Everything I had planned for my life seemed so far away now. I wasn't where I wanted to be. I wasn't who I wanted to be. And in that moment, it felt like I never would be. I kept thinking, maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe this is my life, and it's never going to change. That thought broke me even more. I remember whispering to myself through the tears, why is this happening to me? I asked the universe. I asked God. I asked the empty room. But there was no answer. Just more silence. Then, Something unexpected happened as I sat there. Broken and defeated, I suddenly saw a memory in my mind. It was of me as a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. I was sitting at a desk, drawing a picture of myself, on a stage, smiling, happy, successful. I had written in colorful letters under the drawing, "One day, I will be great." And for some reason, that image hit me like a wave. I had forgotten her. The little girl who believed she could do anything. The little girl who was full of dreams and imagination. The little girl who didn't know anything about fear or failure. And then the pain inside me shifted slightly. It didn't disappear, but something in me began to feel different, like a tiny flicker of light had appeared in the darkness. I realized something important. I wasn't crying because I was weak. I was crying because I had been strong for too long. I had held in so much pain, pressure, and sadness, and my heart had finally said, "Enough." That night wasn't the end of me. It was the end of the pretending. I finally allowed myself to feel everything, to fall apart, to be honest about my pain, to stop acting like I was okay. And strangely, that became the beginning of something new. Because once you hit the lowest point, there's only one direction left, up. And though I didn't know it yet, that night would be the turning point of my life. But let me be clear, I didn't suddenly feel better. The pain didn't vanish. The tears didn't stop immediately. I didn't get the job the next day or wake up feeling strong and ready to fight. No, healing doesn't happen like that. But that night, something very powerful happened. I acknowledged my pain. I faced my truth. I admitted that I was not okay, and in doing that, I gave myself permission to begin again. I promised myself that I would never let myself feel this broken again, not because I would avoid pain, but because I would grow stronger. I would learn. I would rise. Even if slowly, even if silently. That promise became the foundation of everything I built afterward. You see, some victories don't begin with cheering or fireworks. Some victories begin with quiet tears, whispered promises, and a broken heart that refuses to stay broken. That night, on the cold floor of my room, I cried like I never had before. And that night, I made a silent promise. I don't know how I'm going to win, but I will. That was the breaking point, and that was also the beginning of becoming someone new. The floor was still cold. My legs had gone numb from sitting in the same position for hours. The tears had dried on my face, but the ache in my chest was still there, deep and heavy, like a stone pressing down on my heart. I felt empty, drained, like I had nothing left to give. It was late, probably past midnight, but I didn't move. I didn't sleep. I just sat there in the dark. The house was silent, and everyone else was asleep. But inside my head, 1,000 voices whispered all at once. "You're not good enough. Nothing will ever change. You failed. You should give up." But somewhere, buried beneath all the noise, another voice appeared. Softer, quieter, but different. It said, "You can't stay here forever." It wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't a magical moment. It was just a whisper, a quiet knowing that I couldn't let this be the end. Not for me. Not for the girl I used to be. Not for the woman I still had the chance to become. I slowly leaned my head back against the wall and looked up. The ceiling was barely visible in the dim light, but I stared at it anyway, as if searching for answers in the shadows. And then I whispered something. At first, I wasn't even sure what I had said. But the words repeated themselves, this time, a little louder, a little clearer. "I promise I will win. I don't know how, but I will." There it was. The promise. Not to anyone else. Not to prove anything to the world. But to me. I wasn't ready to rise that night. I wasn't strong yet. But I had one thing, a promise. A vow that I would not let this pain define me, that I would not allow this moment to be my story's ending. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater and breathed in slowly. My chest still hurt, but the air felt a little easier to take in. I didn't feel strong, but I felt determined. And that, for me, was a start. That night, I didn't make a list of goals. I didn't plan a grand comeback. I didn't post anything online or tell anyone. But in the silence of that room, I made a sacred agreement with my soul. I would rise. I would rebuild. I would become someone stronger. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight. I knew there would still be bad days, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But I also knew one thing. I would never forget that promise. Because when life knocks you down hard enough, something happens. You either stay there, or you get back up with fire in your heart. I wasn't ready to stand yet, but the fire had started. Tiny, fragile, but real. The days that followed were not easy. In fact, some were even worse. The morning after that night, I woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. I barely had the energy to leave my bed, but I reminded myself of the promise. I will win. And that thought, just that one thought, kept me going. I didn't go out and conquer the world, but I made my bed. I took a shower. I ate something. Small things, but they mattered, because when your heart is broken, healing begins in small steps. I started journaling. Every day, even if just for 5 minutes, I wrote about how I felt. Some days I was still sad. Some days I was angry. Some days I felt numb, but I kept writing. Because I had made a promise, and writing helped me hold on to it. I stopped looking at other people's lives online. I turned off social media for a while, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. No more comparing. No more pretending. Just me, trying to figure myself out. And slowly, I started talking to myself differently. Instead of saying, "You failed," I would say, "You tried. That matters." Instead of saying, "You're not good enough," I would whisper, "You're learning. Be patient." Instead of saying, "Nothing will ever change," I told myself, "You are changing." Even now. It wasn't easy. Believe me, I still had breakdowns. I still felt lonely. But the difference was I wasn't alone anymore. I had my promise. And it became my silent friend. One night, I looked at myself in the mirror. Not to fix my hair or check my appearance, but to really look. My face looked tired. My eyes looked older. But there was something else there to fight. Not the loud, aggressive kind of fight, but the quiet fight of a girl who had hit rock bottom and decided to rise. I began doing little things that made me feel proud, even if no one saw them. I started going for walks, listening to calming music, reading books that inspired me. I said no to people who drained my energy. I created space for myself. I also started writing out the version of me I wanted to become. I gave her a name, Future Isabel. She was strong, calm, confident. She walked into rooms with grace. She didn't let failure define her. She wasn't perfect, but she kept going. She smiled with peace, not pain. And every day, I would ask myself, what would future Isabel do today? And I would try to do just one thing that moved me closer to her. This promise I made in the darkness became my anchor. On days I felt like quitting, I reminded myself, I didn't come this far to stop now. On nights when the sadness returned, I whispered again, I will win. Even if I had no idea how, I just knew why. Because I deserved it. Not because someone told me I was special. Not because the world owed me anything, but because I finally believed that I mattered. That my life could be more than pain. That my story could have a new chapter. One evening, weeks after that night on the floor, I watched the sunset from my window. The sky was painted in pink, gold, and orange. It looked like a soft fire burning across the sky. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had hope, real hope. And it all began with that one silent moment when I sat in the dark, broken, and promised myself I would win. That promise became the beginning of my strength. It didn't come from applause. It didn't come from success. It came from within, from me. Some people think strength is loud. They think it looks like shouting your victories from the rooftops, posting your progress online, or walking with unshakable confidence. And maybe for some it is, but I learned something different. I learned that real strength, lasting strength, often grows in silence. It doesn't make a scene. It doesn't demand attention. It moves quietly, patiently, like a seed under the ground that no one sees until one day it blooms. After the night I cried and promised myself to win, life didn't magically change. I didn't suddenly wake up with answers, motivation, or a plan. I still felt tired. I still had doubts. But I had made a promise, and that promise became the light I followed. Even when everything else felt dark. I started with the smallest steps. Some days, just getting out of bed was a victory. Taking a shower felt like an achievement. Brushing my hair, drinking water, breathing deeply. These things may seem small to others, but to me, they were signs I was moving forward. I stopped trying to impress the world. I started trying to heal myself. One of the most important changes I made was creating a morning routine. I didn't have a job to go to at the time. I didn't have a schedule, so I made my own. I began waking up at the same time every day just to remind myself that I was in control of something. I would open my curtains, let the sunlight in, and sit quietly for a few minutes before checking my phone or doing anything else. Sometimes I meditated. Sometimes I just stared at the sky. But I gave myself that time to breathe, time to exist, time to feel. Then I would write. Nothing fancy, just a notebook and a pen. I would write whatever came to mind. How I felt, what I feared, what I wanted. I didn't filter anything. I let it all out. And slowly, those pages became my healing space. The notebook didn't judge me. It didn't rush me. It just held my truth. As I kept writing, I started to see patterns. I saw what triggered my sadness. I saw what gave me peace. And most importantly, I started noticing moments of growth, little signs that I was becoming someone stronger. I remember one day, I caught myself smiling in the mirror after brushing my teeth. It was such a tiny moment, but it mattered. Because weeks before, I couldn't even look myself in the eyes without wanting to cry. That smile, small and quiet, was a sign. You're healing. Another time, I walked past a cafe I used to avoid. I had painful memories. They're memories of sitting alone, rejected, invisible. But this time, I walked in. I ordered a tea. I sat by the window and watched people go by. And I felt okay. Not great. Not magical. Just okay. That okay meant the world to me. Because healing doesn't always feel amazing. Sometimes, it feels like walking with heavy shoes. Like standing in the rain with no umbrella. But then one day, you realize you're not drowning anymore. You're just wet. And eventually, you'll dry. That was my strength, quiet survival. Not giving up. Not staying down. Choosing, over and over again, to keep moving. I also started doing something I had never done before. I celebrated my small wins. If I sent out one job application, I gave myself credit. If I cooked a healthy meal, I told myself, well done. If I said no to something that drained me, I called it progress, and slowly, these small things added up, like puzzle pieces forming a bigger picture. People didn't see what was happening. To them, I was still just Isabel. Still jobless, still quiet, still the same. But inside, I was changing. I was becoming the version of myself I used to dream about, the one who didn't quit. I wasn't there yet, but I was on the way. I also started surrounding myself with better energy. I stopped chasing friends who didn't value me. I stopped apologizing for needing time and space. I found comfort in solitude. At first, being alone scared me. I thought loneliness would crush me. But instead, it taught me. It taught me how to enjoy my own company. How to walk without needing someone to hold my hand. How to sit in silence and not feel empty. And that became my strength too. One evening, I was journaling, and I wrote something I'll never forget. You're not weak because you cry. You're strong because you keep going. That sentence changed the way I saw myself. I had always thought strength looked like smiling no matter what. Never complaining, never breaking. But now, I saw that strength was getting back up when you didn't even want to open your eyes. It was trying again, after failing 10 times. It was loving yourself, even when the world made you feel unlovable. There were setbacks, of course. I had days where everything felt heavy again. Days where I cried again. But this time, the tears didn't feel hopeless. They felt like part of the process, like rain helping the flowers grow. Eventually, something beautiful began to happen. Opportunities started coming back, not because the world had suddenly become kind, but because I had changed. I was no longer chasing validation. I was chasing growth. I got a small freelance job, nothing big, but it felt like a breakthrough. I worked hard, gave it my all, and for the first time in months, I earned money again. Not just money self worth. I remember receiving my first payment and holding it in my hands. It wasn't a lot, but I stared at it with tears in my eyes. Not because of the amount, but because of what it meant. You did this, Isabel. You kept your promise. That job led to another. And another. Slowly, my confidence grew, not the fake kind I used to wear like armor, but real confidence, built from hard days and silent victories. I started speaking up more. I laughed more. I walked taller. And yet, I never forgot the night it all began. Night I cried and promised myself to win. That night became my anchor, my reminder, my turning point. Even now, whenever I face something hard, I go back to that moment. Not because I want to relive the pain, but because I want to remember the power I found in it. And that power still lives in me. Not loud, not dramatic, but strong. Silent strength, built day by day, step by step, tear by tear. Today, if you see me, you'll see someone calm, focused, grounded. You might even say I look strong. But you won't see the quiet mornings I spent crying into my pillow. You won't see the journals filled with fear and doubt. You won't see the battles I fought alone, in the silence of my room. But I see them, and I honor them. Because they made me who I am. Not broken, not lost, but brave. I didn't need to shout to prove I was strong. I just needed to keep going. And I did. That's the real victory. That's how I won.